Pete's gonna speak.
With that.
Is this something we can keep?
I've got it. Comes in gone or?
Yeah, I'm good tomorrow.
Okay, all right.
Scan. No, yeah.
Thank you.
Because we should go over.
So if everybody remembers, back in November, Rick and I were here, a little overview of the state of the plant, some opportunities that we saw to upgrade the plant, some opportunities for cost savings and revenue. At that point, the town agreed with us to move forward, working with B&L to do an evaluation on the plant. And I think that's about where we are. We just about met our time frame. We're a few weeks off, but still got a lot of work done, and should have some good results. So we're sort of taking the time to bring this thing full circle in a very short time frame. So with us there, we have Frank Knudsen from B&L, George Bellington,
7 months.
and Pete Baker. So I'll hand it off to Ken.
All right, thanks, Art. So the discussion in November led to us being here in January, and it was a mix of different things, but we just wanted to kind of recap what the theme of that presentation was in the introduction to this effort before George gets into the details of it. And again, the focus here and the opportunity is to take what's traditionally been your water pollution control facility, or WPCF, and with this next set of asset renewal projects, transform that facility to what the industry is now calling a WRRF, or a water resource recovery facility. And just I ask that you read this again and keep this in mind as we present some opportunities here. The mindset now on a WRRF is all inputs are valuable resources within your wastewater. As such, the objective is to separate, extract, reuse, or convert valuable water, energy, and commodities from wastewater while using utility assets in innovative ways to reduce costs, increase revenue, and strengthen your economy. And again, some of the ideas that both Art and Rick brought forth to the board that you need to keep in mind, and as we have, is this is going to be a new way of thinking. It's a new way of doing business, and we're looking at not only what's going on at the plant today and the trends, but also we need to look to the future because this is a 20 to 30-year planning period that we're discussing. So with that, again, we've done a lot of work with a lot of valuable input and help from the operators. So I'm going to go through goals here very quickly, then I'm going to turn over the ropes to George, who's going to review some of the alternatives that we looked at for all of the major unit processes that weren't addressed under phase one, with some help from NYSERDA's FlexTech program. We did some additional modeling of the plant, which gave us some detailed analysis that then appeared in our recommendations. We're certainly going to be discussing some of the opportunities for revenue-generating facilities and running through some numbers, which I'm sure you'll have, Tom, some pro forma on potential revenue that could come in, and then I'll jump back in on how do you move forward and how do you pay for the project. So, on goals, again, the phase one project, I'll point to this real quick, nearly complete. Your secondary clarifiers and all the associated pumping, those are your critical last step before your wastewater hits the lake. Those are in great shape and they've really improved the performance. This asset renewal project is going to focus on upgrades to your aeration system, your biological treatment process, optimizing unit processes, reducing power costs, energy efficiency. That was the main thrust of the FlexTech grant that you received. And then more importantly, your anaerobic digesters. You know, the liquid goes to the lake, all the waste solids have to go somewhere. There's opportunities here to, and you must construct improvements to your anaerobic digester system, with opportunities to optimize gas handling, to generate power off of that, and then also to bring in outside liquid waste in the form of septics or leachate, utilization of a dryer to cut down on your disposal costs, and to generate revenue to offset your operation costs. So that's what George is going to get into. So again, multiple drivers for this PER, preliminary engineering report. Top of the list, if you take a look at this photo down in the right-hand corner, this is a liquid waste stream, and you can look under your out. This is the liquid centrate that's coming off your centrifuge. So this is the part of this waste sludge that now comes off the machine, and there's so much flow, and the drains in this particular building are so old they're not functioning that the operators are basically walking through this filtrate when they're operating the centrifuge and solids dewater. Operator safety is huge, code compliance, asset renewal project. Again, a lot of this infrastructure, like the anaerobic digester where the covers failed, you can see all the sludge that's bubbled up and around. You're not capturing any gas whatsoever. Asset renewal is a huge theme here. Improvements to that complex are going to address increasing tipping fees, and also enhancements to your digesters will allow you to take in more waste than is being produced at the plant. Energy optimization, again, aeration tanks are your largest energy user at the facility. The blowers are woefully outdated. That asset and many more needs to be renewed. We're looking at a 20-year planning period here, which accommodates growth for the town and your outside customers. So with that, we will be bringing you 2 deliverables within the coming weeks. The deadline imposed for the preliminary engineering report, which will go to the DEC and ESC, is July 16th. So this is basically the guts of our draft report that will come to the town. The board will bless that, hopefully. We'll get that submitted. Part of that PER, which you're familiar with, is this NYSERDA FlexTech study. Again, that's the deeper dive into the energy aspects and the cost savings from the recommended improvements. So with that, George is going to discuss the alternatives.
Thank you, Ken, and thanks for having us back. There's a variety of unit processes that have been looked at the plant in detail, and we've had a couple of one-on-one workshops and tours and inspections with your operators and management folks So this wasn't done in an engineering office. This was done with the guys in Orange as well, and multiple other staff people at the plant. As Ken talked about, in green, the boxes are your current project that's finishing up. It's a wonderful improvement to the project. But the meat of the plant that's in yellow, there's a bunch of stuff in there that's old, that needs some help. And not just fixing it, trying to look at this plant going into this future, into this Worth type facility. One of the areas to jump to. So the headworks is the beginning of the plant. This is where the wastewater comes in. And one of the first things that operators want to see is they want to grab anything out that can clog up pumps. The headworks facility pulls out rags, diapers, toys that children flush down the toilet. And you do this with some screening devices. And this is a newfangled device that pulls more of it out. The more of that debris that comes out, the better the rest of the plant works. And then to the right, there's some equipment that's removing the grit. The grit is the abrasive, the stones and the sand that can ruin equipment. If you can get all of the grit out and all of the debris out, Rick's job gets a lot easier at the plant. Next slide. So there's some options that this PER looked at. Basically, the existing screens at the plant need to be updated. The newer technology screens does a much better capture rate. They are quarter-inch screens that literally remove a lot of the debris. Part of this project, and I think it's come from these two gentlemen, is this is our opportunity that this equipment has valves and stuff going in and out. These valves are very old, so all through the plant we're replacing valves and slide gates so they're functional for the operators. But this grit system, there were some options. We could put parallel grit systems in at a higher cost to the town. The existing grit system can work if it's upgraded. So the green box is where we landed, where we have $1.38 million of headworks work that needs to be done at the wastewater. The primary clarifiers is the next part of the treatment process. This is where the solids fall out of the wastewater. This slows the flow down, and all of the solids can get removed and pulled and it's sucked out of these tanks with a bunch of pumps. 20, 25, 30-year-old pumps, flow meters, motorized valves that are all outdated, need to be updated. We were headed into this to build a fourth clarifier. As you expand, you need more tankage. We'll talk about modeling in a bit. We've taken a hard look at this as engineers. And the good news is you do not need a fourth primary clarifier. So instead of spending a lot of money on that tank, that's something that doesn't need to happen. But your existing tank needs new chains and sprockets and the new pumps that we talked about. So we need approximately $350,000 worth of improvement in the primary treatment part of the plant. The aeration system is where Rick's best workers are. It's millions and millions and millions of bacteria in that tank, and they're the ones doing the work. That aeration tank and all of those microbes need oxygen to survive and to do treatment, and it gets its oxygen from blowers. As Ken mentioned, the blower system that are providing the air are very old, and the problem is they run constantly. So at 3 in the morning, Rick is doing a bad job because the blower's running, and it really doesn't have to run that fast, but there's no controls to handle that. And then during the day, it might not be running high enough when the load comes in from the facilities. So the idea here is to do an upgrade to add some automation. And that automation will be improving the bubbles that are in these tanks. These are large tanks with a whole new bubbling system. It'll have many valves and many controls to monitor the dissolved oxygen. This is like your fish tank, how much air you're giving to the fish. But now at 3 in the morning, as you have less load because everybody's asleep, that blower can slow down. And it's part of the NYSERDA aspects of this plant, the energy savings. So instead of that blower, 150 horsepower blower running all the time, it now might be running at 75 horsepower at 3 in the morning, saving valuable dollars for Art's electrical budget. And that's being done because it's operating new turbo blowers. These blowers are proven new technology and they respond well to all this. So we're looking at a $1.8 million amount of work in the really key operating part of the plant. We also did some modeling because initially, in fact it's on some of the initial slides, we thought you were going to be needing much more, I'm going to say, innovativeness to get the capacity you needed. It was this IFAS system. The good news is, or the bad news, the IFAS is a much more expensive alternative, but it required a lot more town money to do it. It's not needed. We can improve your existing aeration tanks, and they can be updated to take care of the town for many years.
George, something we didn't talk about in that slide. We currently do not have redundancy on our blowers. If the large blower goes down, we have no support for it. We have very, very minimal support. So I want to make that point.
They have perfect support of something that's too small and insufficient. And now the microorganisms do not have enough oxygen. Rick doesn't have enough treatment, and he has a violation. So it's critical to have redundancy. This is 3 blowers. One will be on all the time. Second one might be on maybe at 11 in the morning when the load is coming in from residents. And the third one is the redundant. Things break. So all 3 of these will be run and rotated by the wastewater staff. There's sludges that are generated at wastewater plant. We send solids down the sewer, and you need to settle those out. And all those extra microorganisms that we grow, eventually you have too many of them. Those microorganisms are eating the wastewater and making more microorganisms. And we have to waste those organisms in tanks that settle the solids out. And these are called thickeners. We looked at a couple of options. There's some existing, there's an existing old thickener tank that we looked at and some other old tankage to modify. We found, in this case, the best option was to construct 2 thickener tanks in a space, brand new tanks with the infrastructure for $780,000. What's nice about these tanks, it has limited operator needs, so they run very nicely when plant personnel isn't there. So you're basically pumping liquid in it, allowing the settling. It's an automatic, low-tech tank. They've been proven for a lot of years. The town used to do quite a business bringing in some outside waste, some septage and some liquids. We haven't been able to do that because of existing infrastructure can't handle it. To reinstate that, creating some screening devices that can take septage that comes in from areas in the town that are not part of the sewer system. When someone cleans a septic tank, that stuff has to go someplace. It would go through these screening devices to remove the stuff we talked about earlier, the rags and the debris that comes through a septic hole. So this liquid receiving is much larger than just septage. We're looking at upgrading the receiving facilities to get landfill leachate to come in, septage to come back in, and some other high-strength waste and stuff. And we'll talk about that a little bit further. But all these liquids can come in as a revenue source, and the receiving facilities have approximately a $1.4 million cost. There is an option not to do liquid receiving, just to leave the system as it is, but then you lose your revenue potential. Secondly, the stuff that does come in would go through existing pumps, and that would have continued maintenance issues. So in this case, we're recommending the receiving facilities. In the aeration tanks, you have a bunch of microorganisms that need oxygen. In the digesters, the anaerobic digesters, we do not have oxygen. They work, those microorganisms do not need oxygen. And your existing digesters do not perform that well. Their covers are leaking, mixing is inadequate. They're inadequate in size. So we look at all this no action, and what really is a big driver is operator safety. The digesters do not meet current codes. Biogas is something you have to treat with respect, and it can be dangerous for operators. So we kind of look at doing no action on the digesters is really not an option. What we're suggesting is to take one of the existing digesters and renovate it. We're suggesting adding a brand new digester adjacent. We're talking about retrofitting one of the digesters as a gas holder and a secondary digester, and adding all the gas safety piping in flares that meets code. And the bottom line is this and some other technology, including upgrades to the thickening system of the digester. This whole digestion complex is about a $6 million piece. The existing anaerobic digestion facility has not had investment in many 10 years. The digester that we're talking about would be a 50-foot diameter tank. The picture on the upper left is one of these tanks being constructed. It would have mixing in it to get the microorganisms in contact with the food. The bottom is the gas holding structure, capturing biogas. Biogas is a free resource that you can capture and reduce your natural gas bill with, and the digesters need to be heated. Just like us, our bodies are 98 degrees, Rick will run these digesters at 98 degrees. That's where the anaerobic digesters need to be, and that's why you need the ability to get heat back. When you have all these solids and you're all done with digestion, now you got to do something with it. I wish Mary was still here. She's issuing permits to get for fill. And you have 20 cubic yards of sludge a day? No, Mary can't. As you said, you can't send bad stuff. You can't send fill unless it meets permit. Rick's stuff that comes off the digester now has to go to a landfill. You do that by dewatering it with dewatering equipment. There's a very, very old backup dewatering device called a belt press that is way beyond its useful life. And you have a small centrifuge there that's over 20 years old. That centrifuge breaks tomorrow. The town of Webster is scrambling because every single day, 5 days a week, that device has to run. So we do not see, next slide, we do not see not doing something with the dewatering equipment as an option, just because it's so important to the facility. We think it's essential, and the recommendation is adding a new centrifuge. The existing centrifuge is fine as a backup, but not as the prime workhorse. We buy a new and install a new centrifuge where the old belt press is. That would be now the prime workforce. Add new conveyors, and that's about a $760,000 item. This is really one of the huge drivers here. With my gray hair, we can go back 20 years, and tipping fees at landfills at $30 a ton was not uncommon. The cost for the town of Webster to get rid of its biosolids has increased quite a bit over the years. Historically, sending it to the landfills, especially where you are, you're in the western part of the state with all of this western New York State landfill capacity, it was the cheap place to go. But the market is changing now. The low tipping fee trends are going away. There is a significant shift from New York State DEC because of climate issues and other things, not just to put organic type waste into landfills. They're discouraging what they used to encourage. Secondly, there's a lot of local capacity issues now. You can't get your stuff, your biosolids to High Acres or Millseed. They're at sludge capacity. They're not looking for more. Ontario County, where you're going to now, is tentatively set to close in 2028. That's a couple years from now. It goes quick. And Seneca Meadows has a possible 2025 closure. Those closures and capacity issues are important, and the trends for the state, but really what hits home is the fees. Just a few years ago, you were paying $85 a wet ton. Your current contract's $125 a wet ton. We are seeing no contracts that are being let. They're not going less. It's going up. This is one of the trends that's happening statewide. And in May of next year, your contract's up. You'll be out to bid fairly soon for that renewal. And we hope you get a good number, but we know where this trend is going. And the trend, unfortunately, is going in the wrong direction. So one of the keys to this Worth project, and one of the drivers was discussions with staff, was drying sludge. Drying sludge is, when you see sludge come and it gets in that truck, it's hard to imagine. It's 75% water. It's just the nature of, you would think it's a lot more solids, but lab tests will say it's 75% water, 25% solids. If a sludge dryer is an evaporator, it's not burning the sludge, it's just evaporating the moisture out. And if you can evaporate most of the water out and only leave, mostly leave the residue, then what you're sending to a landfill is a tremendously less. So, go back to we didn't want to just come in here saying this is Art and Rick and Ken and Pete and George said it's a good idea. The NIWEA organization that Rick and I are members of, just at their spring meeting, had a national expert presenting on sludge drying. This trend is now catching on. It's becoming much more common. And really what it is, it's a risk control thing. Because instead of having a lot of tonnage that you need to manage someplace, it's now a smaller amount, dramatically smaller amount, and you have some options of what you can do with that product. So we looked at a couple of options on sludge drying. For a little more money, we see the sludge dryer as something that can handle all of the town of Webster's product, plus potentially dry a little bit from some outside as a potential revenue source. So this would allow for this sludge cake to be received, mixed in with your material and go through the drying system. And the total cost for this, to go to this, really one of the biggest changes at the facility, to go to sludge drying, is the $6.5 million price tag. So it dramatically reduces the weight through different dryer technologies that are there. This is a device that would fit in half of this room. The product goes in, once again, the moisture is what you're evaporating. And you'd have a spot, not a huge truck like that, but you'd have a spot where a truck could actually dump the material in, and then that product would be pumped to the dryer to make it into these pellet type products. So that's the fun stuff. That's a lot of the operational stuff that affects Rick and his maintenance and operating workers, arts workers every day. But we also have some stuff in the administration buildings. Quite frankly, the space is a little too small, especially as staff has grown. You have temporarily fixed that with that lease trailer at $100 or $700 a month has been providing some nice conference room space, because you can't really do that in that small break room. And we do like the janitor's closet here that Rick has as your chief operator. It's a 65 square foot phone booth. It needs some space for computers, for file system, for break room, for training. And the bottom line is you're doing all this to get this office to be up to standards. The existing footprint is to the left. There's some modest increases to stretch out some walls and also to make this ADA compliant. You need to be able to have accessibility to all public buildings, as you know. For the office buildings, needs to be ADA compliant. The anaerobic digester top doesn't, but the office does. So the bottom right of this is the ramp issues or area, and then there's a lot of configurations on locker room, restrooms, break rooms, and stuff to be adequate for staff. One of the things we sold on this project a little bit as we were kind of going out the door is there's some NYSERDA money that came to help with this study, and it helped finance some of the additional analysis. And BioWin was what that was. BioWin is a tool. This is a computer tool. I won't bore you with all those, but those are all of Rick's tanks and digesters and pumps. And this model gets set up and inputted, and a bunch of data gets shoved in. And the bottom line is you shove all this data in, and the model predicts how clean the water will come out. And does that, in 20 years, as this town has some growth and these inputs put in, can Rick still produce water that meets state standards? And BioWin helps to predict that, and it also helps the engineers in sizing tanks and whatever. The BioWin model is like 150 pages of computer printouts and something people much smarter than me in my office understand. So the recommendations in pro forma for this project is the to do work on this overall upgrade of this facility, to do everything we've talked about in aeration and solids, septic receiving and digesters and dryers and headworks. So all that is part of the project. Obviously, projects can have no action. That's always an option. I think you would all understand why not the greatest option. It's not what we're here today. We're here to recommend you move ahead on a very comprehensive upgrade of this facility to convert it into a WRF. It's a $31 million project to do headworks, aeration, everything that we've been outlining over the last half hour. Pro forma is a financial spreadsheet with a bunch of cells and a bunch of assumptions that we have put together on this project. And the good side of the project is that this generates some other revenues for you. By reinstating septic and leachate, bringing in some high-strength organic waste, some outside sludges, and some cake, the bottom line is you're able to predict some cash coming in addition to the usual sewer rent you're getting at the facility. So the pro forma has, on one side of the equation, the revenue that comes in. Next. And then we could really have fun going through every column and every... So we do this over 20 years. And on the right of this, in the black, is where all those nice revenue numbers are. And we could just stop right now, Ken could drop the mic, and we could walk out and say, look at all this nice revenue. But there's costs associated with this project. So on the left side of the pro forma is the project cost. The first column is the debt needed to pay for the improvements. This is not the entire improvements in this pro forma. It's the stuff associated with liquid receiving, sludge, and the sludge drying components. The stuff that's outside of the bar screen improvements and the aeration improvements that you have no choice on. So we put approximately $10–11 million of the project that is part of this revenue generating facility as the project cost. There will be more parts and pieces that need to be replaced. There's another pump, there's a dryer that it's going to need to be fixed. So there's money annually set aside or in the budget for that. There's some more electricity to make these toys run. There's some natural gas to run this dryer. So those are the things that cost money. The things on the right are the things that generate revenue. And the bottom line is what does the cash flow look like? And the cash flow looks like, the cash flow shows a positive cash flow in this project in year one. Now, we don't do a pro forma, and Kenny doesn't leave with that. He actually gives that Excel sheet to the town because things change and assumptions change or whatever. All of these things have a variety of, they're all tied to fillable things. So if Art is finding that he can get 8 cents a gallon for something instead of 3 cents, he can pop that in. If electricity goes from 6.8 cents to 9 cents, he can see those changes. So it's a dynamic document that the town has going forward. Next.
Can I ask a quick question before you move on your pro forma? Did I understand you correctly that the project base doesn't that include, it's not the 30 million, it doesn't reflect that, right?
The 30 million is not in that payment. Only the 10, 11 million of the dryer and the liquids receiving portion.
So that which would give us revenue.
The part that gives you revenue, yes. Just like your clarifier project last year, there's no, that's something you just had to do. The other stuff is you got to do it stuff.
Can I comment on that? John, that there's part of this that has to be done, and you kind of saw that on a lot of the left side. We have to do upgrades, there's asset renewal, there's stuff that's useful, there's safety issues. That has to be done. If this additional part isn't added, that actually pays for itself and it has additional revenue to help pay for that base project, it's probably going to affect us even more.
Oh, I totally
So-
agree. I was just,
Yes,
it'd be nice to
clarifying
see,
that.
okay, we're gonna do the whole project, right? Here's what it's gonna cost, here's the revenue, and here's the that.
So we would certainly think that whatever revenue might be positive,
Right.
we're assuming that that's still needed to, obviously, to pay some of the other stuff.
Sure.
And the one thing in this whole, on this pro forma, we did not lower this saying this portion is going to get any grant assistance. So there's a lot of conservative assumptions here. We didn't try to just everything, as we worked with these guys in workshops, we didn't say everything would be loaded at max and getting maximum fee. We tried to be conservative and being more realistic in what the numbers are.
Right, so the numbers that you projected in each area of this project was not taking into consideration any grant money at all, or does it?
On this pro forma, there's no grant money.
I'm trying to figure out areas.
We assume zero to let it stand on its own merits.
Just want to clarify
If we did the entire project and got a 40% grant, we'd probably be bonding about 18 million.
that. Right,
And
and the 40%,
The level debt payment on that is probably going to be about 900,000 a year. So you can add another 350 to this 559 he has.
so even on a standalone, we could
Where he'd be at.
possibly get up to 40%.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, let's walk. So relative to the project funding, a lot of involvement on the Phase 1 clarifier project, and the town was the benefactor of the Water Infrastructure Improvement Act grant for up to 25% or $3 million for the $12 million Phase 1 project. So moving forward with this project, of course, the preliminary engineering report will contain a preliminary plan of finance, and based on our experience in the project, the anticipated funding package that you could get. So, as I mentioned, the PER is due on July 16th, and that's a critical date because what you'd like to do with a project like this is get it listed in the Environmental Facilities Corporation intended use plan. By doing that, that puts you in line for funding. Driving over here today, I just heard we have a deal. There's infrastructure money coming, that one of the items is water. So moving this to shovel readiness is going to be critical. So by getting this on the funding list, moving it through bond resolution, which I'll cover in schedule, you have the ability to get another WIA grant, which is either 25% or a maximum of $5 million. So you can get $5 million. So that's an assumption that we would make towards the asset renewal aspect of the project. Moving forward, we would anticipate with things getting back to normal, that's a September application for a WIA grant, and part of shovel readiness and complete application is completion of seeker, as well as adopting a bond resolution for the final project. Right now, the consolidated funding application is going on. You're at a point now where you're not really sitting in a position to apply for an implementation grant. It's just an informational statement. But as I mentioned earlier, having the FlexTech component of this piece, we've been successful, and George has been the benefactor of some fairly large FlexTech grants that would look at energy efficiency, innovative technologies, biosolids, beneficial reuse, and so on. So that's another avenue that you now have available to this project, having used some of their planning. So, moving forward, again, we're here tonight. Here's an introduction. Any questions tonight that come to us will be reflected in a draft PR, which will come to your representatives in Rick and Art. They will review it, will address comments, and be back in front of the board with a final PR that you would have to bless before we submit it to EFC. Now, one thing I want to touch on, and I think we went through this with phase one, is you have a town sewer district. Under town law, any improvements to your facilities need to be done in accordance with Article 12, 202B. So what we're going to do is we're going to structure this PR as a PR and mapping plan, which could then be used by the town's attorney and Paul to basically establish the maximum amount to be expended, the preliminary plan of finance, the estimated user costs, and it's all in there so you comply with the 202B. Seeker would be a type 1 action, coordinated review, similar to what you did with the first project, and then once that's completed, it would move towards to a bond distribution. So ideally, that should follow right on the heels of the submission to ESC. We are under contract to assist you with completing seeker. So, once the bond resolution is done, WIA goes in, see where the project's listed on the IUP. If it scores well, you'd be in line for funding next year, and then you could start design as soon as you want it, depending on how you want to proceed. But as you know, with phase one, it's going to take some time to get the funding in place, to do the design, to let the contracts, and so on. So here's just some ballpark dates that we've thrown out, so that best case you can be starting construction a year from now, which would be a fairly aggressive schedule. And a project of this size, once they mobilize, year and a half.
18 months to probably fully operational within 2 years.
2 years.
I think one of the things that we know right now, because of the climate, is progressing a project from a concept to get design going is so important because of this, what was the last slide, the shovel-ready word, because we're finding the more projects shovel-ready, maybe the better chances to get some money. We have a couple projects we're working on in another part of the state where you're kind of being asked, what do you have ready to go right now? And with money, infrastructure money coming available, having anything shovel-ready is having something shovel-ready doesn't necessarily mean you're building it. It just means you're ready, because a lot of these grants seem to fizzle away if someone is dragging their feet, not getting it to a finish line. So I think that just seems to be what we're seeing with some of the infrastructure money that seems to be starting to open up.
Can I just go back one thing, a few slides back, you don't have to go back to it, but you talked about, which was it was very conservative on a lot of these, how much waste is going to come in, how much was going to be charged for it. But the biosolids, the Class A biosolid that will come out of this dryer, it was figured just what we're still going to landfill, but there's so much upside to that across the state, and you've been on some projects, and there's other opportunities for that.
Yeah, we show a huge savings and it looks nice, but we're still showing pretty substantial cost to the town. We know in the Hudson Valley, there's a sludge dryer facility. They do their sludge drying. Their product goes out the door, it's transported and removed for free. We're saying your stuff's going to cost $125 a ton, trying to be worst case for that dry product. So there are some other possibilities that can be used as a fuel source. It still has the organics in it. It could be used as an additive, a compost additive. So it could be landfill. So there's other upsides, but we wanted to, once again, we're not trying to be the snake oil salesman here. We're trying to say, if the stars do not align, does it still show some benefits to the town? Yes.
Some municipalities that you work with that install that right that out. I
Right.
think that's a very important component
It's
of this going forward from a cost saving standpoint. So that's why, that's why I asked you the question.
So the municipality we're working with, well, first of all, no one was doing sludge drying except a handful because of $35 and $50 a ton fees.
Right.
But because of this trend, it's now becoming more common. Altoona, Pennsylvania is a current project of ours, and that is a larger drying facility, about 3 times the size of the dryer that Webster would need. And it's under construction as we speak. Delivery of the dryer is slated for October. So that is right now our current active in
So you don't have
construction.
one to a municipality that you're working with already has one up and running and has shown these types of savings.
The Nisky Unit project is a project that we just did almost a similar size, $30 million upgrade on. They had an existing dryer that they've had for 10 years. Part of the project was some conveyor improvements or whatever. And that facility has been producing a dry product for 10 years. In fact, that dry product, they got rid of it for $20 a ton at the former facility that I ran. We used it to blend into wet cake. So there's not a lot of sludge dryers that we can drive around New York State to show you.
Okay.
We'll have to do a road trip down to Pennsylvania where a couple of them are operating now or under construction.
Art, what's your budget for your disposal this year?
$500,000.
$500,000. So in theory, from what we're talking about, 25% solid, 75% water. If that dryer works the way you're talking about, we're talking about a 75% reduction in landfill.
So
I
John,
mean, right here, you're saying only 255. But what we talked about earlier is that the sludge we're hauling away right now is 25% solid, 75% water. We get rid of 75% of water, that's 75% of that 500,000 should be saved.
again, these are very conservative numbers, and we wanted to stay very conservative. John, the facility that Rick and I toured back in the fall in Pennsylvania, they're on their 2nd generation of dryers, and they give their Class A biosolids away for free. They have no long.
One other thing is, the other line items here is the septage, the leachate, sludge revenue. Leaching, I think as we were talking in our committee, we're probably not going to, even if it's available to us, we're probably not going to get very much because of what Wayne County's doing.
Yeah, the numbers.
Because the proximity of the landfills is more, they're going to go to Wayne County.
Those numbers were driven off of history, historical data from our plant.
We're talking about reality right now because we just had the guy from Wayne County come in talking about their consolidation. And most likely they're going to be the ones that are going to receive the majority of the leachate because of proximity.
And understand that this is actually a relatively small quantity. The actual gallons per day.
I think, yeah, this pro forma, I think it's 9,000 gallons.
So we're talking,
A tanker a day.
you're talking a tanker a day. This is not a major acceptance. Yeah, so 9,000 gallons a day, 5 days a week. It's really a modest assumption for leachate. Might that be less? Yes. Might the drying tipping fees be, I think the pro forma goes both ways depending on what business model you pursue.
Okay, I agree with the landfill disposal savings wholeheartedly, and I'm all for this. I just question the other ones,
Well,
if they're gonna be reality.
right, what I found in Rome was, it's a market analysis, and it's because they're traveling somewhere, doesn't mean they always want to, or, so it's a market, and you go in and see what they're paying, how far they're traveling, so it's a lot of like looking it out and calling up and say, hey, what are you paying, what are you willing to pay, you know, kind of thing. So you can negotiate those, and if you don't get the 9,000 leachate, okay, maybe you take 26,000 septic. So it's kind of like you can balance it out and pull in some other, these are loading numbers too on what the plant can take. It's not exactly, so we're saying we can take to treat 9,000 leachate and 20,000, if we don't do the leachate, we fill in some more outside sludge or something like that.
Yeah, so, good point by Rick. If leachate's not as available, maybe it's a little bit more on the septage gallons. Historically, 20,000 gallons a day has happened before here. It's not a reach. Maybe that becomes a little bit more of what you bring in.
Those numbers are awful.
Art, and this has been brought up a lot. There was kind of a shock back in 18, 19 when it went from $250,000 to sludge haul to the landfills to $500,000. So that was because we got into a new 3-year contract at $125 a ton. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. If that contract expires in May of 2022, which is less than a year away, what's the process of going out and getting what prices are right now? See if that 125 a ton, if we're staring down the barrel of 130, 140, 150.
So the contract doesn't expire. The first 3 years expires. We have 3 one-year options. However, well, that's the question. Can we renew it at what cost?
And the problem is if you decide to go out for bid, all of a sudden you may lose that renewal price at 125 and maybe 150 if you go out for bid. So you
Slow
play
down,
the market.
hold on. I gotta back this up.
Okay.
So we're in a 3-year contract,
With option of 3
Right.
additional years.
3 additional years,
One
but
year.
they don't tell you what the price is of the option of the 3 additional years?
No. And we bid that contract, we bid it 3 times, we had 1 bidder each time.
I think you have
You
to.
can't get the drying facility up in 2 years.
Nobody knows that. What I'm saying is, I think
But we have to start
you
somewhere.
have to, you have
You
to
have to
accept
start
the
somewhere.
reality of the fact is that they got us.
Yeah.
They got us
It's not
what they
going to
want
get
us.
better.
They
Right, it's
think
not gonna get better.
Well, they definitely got us because we're gonna have to pay for it one way or the other.
And so Barry, that's a great point. We're not the only ones, right? There's other little towns, surrounding us that are in the same boat.
And again, what you do is if you have the capacity and we have it, and you say to those other little towns, hey, bring it here for half the price that you're gonna bring it to a landfill, I'm throwing half the price out there. I'm just saying that we could treat it cheaper and they're gonna save money and we're gonna make a revenue off of it.
Actually, one of the other interesting things is we almost have to take a step back. The dryer's going to do the final getting rid of a lot of water, but we're also reducing that down because we now have an anaerobic digester that's working. Anaerobic digesters, when you put a pound in, 30% of it gets converted to gas. So right now, the digesters are doing something, but they're not as effective as they're supposed to be. So that 500,000 gallon brand new digester that's being part of this is actually very important. That centrifuge is very important because it dries out more of the water before it goes to the dryer. So all those steps are interconnected.
Part of the problem we had with that centrifuge was I don't think it's over 20 years old. I think that was built around 2006. Part of the problem we had with that was that the dewatering, the piping below it was never big enough.
Yeah.
And that always held it fast from operating fully to its capacity. Will that all be changed?
Part of the project is where the centrifuge and how it drains through inadequate floor drains. It'll actually be new piping right out of the building. So that problem gets fixed with this project.
For both the new one and the old one?
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
So what we're creating is a competitive advantage. So we're thinking about today and the future.
Yep.
So one of that advantage is taking an outside septage with the septic receiving facility. State of the art. It's swipe card driven. Right now, everything is manual, and he spends hours on it, and it's on the honor system. The guys can come in, swipe their card. How long does it take to offload that truck?
Depends how thick the stuff is, but, 15 minutes, 10 minutes if it's there.
So there-
And that swipe card is kind of neat, like you said, honor system. If you don't have the swipe card, the valve doesn't open, so the trucker could just sit there forever. So it automates the valves in operation, and it generates the billing reports.
Correct.
So,
So there's a competitive advantage. The driver's going to want to come there. They can turn those trucks quicker. It's a cleaner process. They're in and out. They're making more money. In concert with that is the dryer, and we would have a competitive advantage to the local municipalities. Hey, bring your stuff here for a reduced cost of what you're paying, and we can drive some more revenue there.
So what would the capacity of the driver along the lines of bringing
Well,
other?
the goal was to design it that during the 8-hour shift, we could treat ours, or maybe a little extended. What we saw in Pennsylvania is they would turn their dryer on Monday morning, and they only worked the day shift, and it would run till Friday, 24 hours a day, so you could take in your outside, have that treated during the evenings. There's controls on it, there's cameras on it, so if something goes wrong, but that allows you that other 16 hours or 10 hours or 12 hours in the day to treat outside work.
and part of the conservative part right now, sorry, just is that we didn't say that this dryer would be running 24 hours a day. Just once again, not to oversell it. We had a 14-hour operation, so there's actually some extra other capacity to switch out.
Yeah, the dryer says 2 pounds sludge for a day, an operational day. Everything on the access is essentially the same dryer.
Okay.
That's basically how it was. So there'd be a maximum 24-hour output, 1.5 pounds per hour, and 24. That'd be the most of the dryer. This pro forma solution.
So any outside entity coming in would have to come in on those off hours?
No, they'll dump it during the day, and then there'll be a hopper that hopper's the white spot to continue to feed the dryer.
Okay.
It's like a big hole in the ground, door opens, they dump in, and then you slowly pump that stuff out. So
Mixes with ours and then pumps it.
So you brought up a good point that, you go to that, hey, it's going to be 2 years out. I look at that 2 years as an opportunity while they're building the plant. That's the opportunity that Rick and I have to go out and sell our services. We can go to the towns, we can go to the industries.
We've kind of already started.
Yeah.
Already made phone calls just to see what's out there.
And I think, and what can we do with that plastic? Can we get rid of it for free? So we can hit the ground running.
Two questions. I'm looking at the timeline here, and obviously June 24th is today. The draft of the hearing report you'll have by next Wednesday, June 30th. Within that, like this aggregate $31 million any grants or anything like that, does that include the engineering costs?
And then the fees include some contingencies and the legal and engineering fees. That's all part of the 30 million.
Okay. Actually, I have a couple more than two. But then you have the deadline of July 16th for CWS. What does that stand for?
Clean Water State Revolving Fund.
Of course. How did I not know that? And,
We had several conversations with Phase 1 on the WIA. They administer the WIA grant as well.
right.
But EFC,
Clean Water State Revolving.
Clean Water State Revolving Fund.
Okay. And so the $64 question, isn't that the... this is very robust and very thorough and all that. Without getting into, I don't expect you to have dead nuts accurate numbers on this, but village and town decide to consolidate, and they make that decision in the next month or two. how much tweaking does this have?
We did talk about that as a group, and looking at the Bioman model, just big picture, probably the fourth primary clarifier would come back in.
Yeah.
You've got plenty of digester capacity in this.
Digester
One other,
capacity.
one other, right?
That's where we
Yeah.
It sounds good.
Well, no, actually, yeah, because the grit removal would be, the plan would be keep the grit removal at the village.
Oh, that's right.
The current
And
plan,
those are primary, right?
Oh, right.
Separate networks over there.
there's about 1.3 million from our prior effort, which would be, the estimate that I think Novella put together regarding the upgrades they would need to their headworks, which is with the bar screen and grid removal. They have that in the village, it's in great shape. So the concept is they would keep out, that would remain operational, whether it's the village or whether it's the town operating that. That essentially pre-treats that wastewater, and that wastewater now kind of comes in after town's headworks, and then we have that fourth primary clarifier.
The solids handling portion here, the bigger digester and the dryer and all that, basically you now have your solids customer. You're going to probably import less because it's going to be coming in from the village. So
Yeah, and I appreciate you when you say customer, actually we're partners on that. Because if we do this and the village does their own thing, they will be our customer because this is the future in the village. They can't take septage in. They wouldn't have this technology. They don't have it built into their plan. So is it safe to say you go from 31 million to potentially like 33 million, but then you go to a 40% grant potential because of the incentivized.
Yeah, so the parallel or the sister grant program is the intermunicipal grant or the IMG. And as we talked, to qualify for that, you need to have an executed IMA.
Yeah.
To have a complete application. Of course, there's no guarantees on that, but that is the higher 40% grant amount up to 10 million, I think.
10 million, yeah. And I think that the village inclusion, we want some very, a mile high up, and I'd say probably close to 4 or 5 million on top of that 31 as far as the additional components. There's about $1.5 million that the village that are required to kind of demolish the plant, get that into something like the fourth primary clarifier. I think there's still some unknowns on the aeration basin for what we can do with those, but with the Bioway model, it's a relatively quick answer as far as can we tweak that existing system, can we increase more capacity, some of the infrastructure there before we have to take the next step, which would be that part of the driver, the driver of the digest process. But right now, 4 to 5 million, we think is the added
35 million.
So you need the IMA to go for the IMG.
Correct.
I know the village had on their agenda tonight to vote on, to go pursuing this consolidated community system and have an IMA negotiated. I don't know that.
It's not clear right now.
It's what?
It's not clear. At first I heard they weren't, and now I'm hearing it's not really clear whether they're going
Okay.
right now.
I think it would be safe to say, even if the vote went to consolidation tonight, there would not be an IMA agreement in place to move forward with this next marriage.
No, we do not.
The July 5th, 16th date there is the one date that Kenny and I didn't make up. That's from the state of New York. So that's,
EFC, you're on the final intended use plan. You have the ability to modify that property. If you're amended to your PR or submitted an annual checklist that just updates the cost. So you're not, your main goal is to get a project on that list, get it on the annual.
No, I get it. No, I do get that. And,
amendments happen, things change. And if for some reason the IMA happens in a few months from now, and it can take us a different course. The good news is, I don't think, other than a couple of minor tweaks, I think 95% of what's been shared with you tonight happens either way. It might be, like Pete said, maybe maybe the aeration blower has to go up from 5,000 SCFM to 6,000. Maybe something, but I think we're talking very small tweaks.
Not, I mean, I think anything we're looking at is something's added on, that wouldn't, anything we would do on the town side, the village side really would be anticipating monitoring, so the aeration process is kind of around.
But and now speaking to the amendment, even with phase one, amend it prior to going in for, because it was, the original PDR was done so far in advance, it had to be amended.
That's just the standard process. The original PDR was done, if this is a fast track, those projects are listed in the
So it's nothing out of the ordinary.
Well, Bill, I agree with you, and obviously, we don't want to wait, so we got to do something.
We got a deadline date.
Well, I know that, but I just want to make sure I understand, because I also heard that we can't spend this kind of money. Did I hear that earlier?
Well, it's
So,
a lot of money, we have to really take it seriously.
Well, that's what I mean.
Our big concern, what's it gonna cost our resident to do this?
I guess. Yeah, I understand.
I don't think we have a choice.
We don't.
Well, I think, just for round numbers, when you did the cash flow analysis, you did on the 11 million, the 20 million that you didn't do it on is the ones that have got to be done.
Right.
They're out of code, the DEC's gonna hammer us soon.
It's an improvement that has to be done.
And I guess I've been getting a crash course in this whole thing, and Paul, and we've gotten a lot tighter understanding of the numbers, debt financing, and what it means to the EDU charge and all that stuff.
Right.
31 million less 5 amortized for whatever financing term you're thinking, 30 years divided by 17,800 units. Debt service.
But there's also the IMB, maybe additional grant.
Yeah.
I think that,
And then
that,
add another 16,300.
Can we go to 40%, or are you saying we're limited, it's a lesser amount than 40%?
I'm just talking town only. So
Yeah, okay.
we
Yeah,
had
the
5
regional
million
is for that.
that year.
Well, look, I mean, it's getting late, but, we were in a couple budget meetings today, and, the rules are changing, I guess, as the Treasury opines on this ARPA or whatever. Well, we're slotted to get $4.3 million.
Yeah.
At first, they said it was for water, broadband, sewer. Is that what they said?
Yeah.
And now they've added on,
Police.
yeah.
Lost Avenue.
Is there, and I think I understand, I'm starting to get a better handle on shovel ready. And you said, George, let me you go and do it, but to get shovel ready, I think if I understand, well, the board's got to go and vote on the bond, and you can spin that any way you want to the public, but that means you've committed to the bond.
What you're,
You're subject to referendum, and there's a lot of stuff that's still have to go.
That's true, that's true.
the design process takes some time, and to be shovel ready, we're not shovel ready right now. There's
Right.
not a basis of design report prepared. There's not, what do you think, there's probably 200 engineering drawings
Yeah.
associated with it. So if you have something literally ready to go within a certain time frame, that does help you.
And George, I've learned a lot of that on this other project we got going in town. I've heard it from the state so many times, shovel ready, shovel ready. I'm just, my head's kind of spinning right now that if they ever get any traction on this proposed $2.2 trillion infrastructure bill,
Shovel ready.
well, that's the thing. And then, we're not here to talk about whether it's a good idea for the country or not. I'm just saying if it happens, the shovel-ready project, the way I understand it, would be quicker to get some of that money.
Came on the internet today that it was approved.
Get the heck out of
Still
here.
don't-
That's what I said earlier.
On highway over.
Huh?
We had a deal.
1 trillion.
Oh, so they cut it from 2.2 trillion down
Yeah, they
to
made a deal, but they got, there's money coming out.
well, what's a trillion amongst friends, Bill?
You know,
Hey, Tom.
it's not gonna affect.
Yes, sir.
I had attended a conference in Albany a few years back, and the state agencies was about financing and stuff like that, and out of their mouth, we want to give it to the ones that are shovel-ready and the ones we have already given to that utilize the money. They don't like giving it to ones that it sits there and they don't do the project. If you've been proven to use what they give you, they're willing to give you more.
Well, I also have to think that the timing of tonight's presentation, and talking about shovel-ready, and the fact that supposedly it was voted on today, we're already several steps ahead of many other projects that could be out there.
Absolutely.
Those people are just thinking about doing some engineering reports right now. We've got this in front of us.
You've made a big step a few months ago getting this going. July 16th is the next step. What I've seen in a couple of municipalities, other municipalities, similar sized communities, a few of them are considering that chunk of money that came in for water, sewer, and broadband. They're actually using some of those funds to advance design to get more ready for shovel ready. So I'm just saying this, and you can hit me with that microphone if you need to. But I've seen a couple of communities have said the bonding process and getting long-term is one thing, but using some of those funds just to get the ball, to keep the ball rolling. On one of those slides, on the schedule, there's that thing called Start Design in a couple months from now. And that's kind of how we came across on this thing. So that's what kind of gets you here to try to put your hand out for that $1 trillion.
Yeah.
Yeast. And you wanted to be a town board member.
Putting it out, you mean?
I don't know what it's all.
wait a minute. These are very interesting decisions, aren't they? This is not for the faint of heart.
It is not.
But Ken, this thing of getting it listed, there's no commitment to that, correct? Okay. It's just keeps the ball moving. If we don't, then we're pushed back a long time.
You lose a year.
Right.
So getting it listed is really, you haven't done much. You know, you've taken a baby step. Authorizing hop-in for the CFA process to go for some grants. I think next month the seeker process starts rolling through to get the environmental piece. Some of these grants say, we want seeker done, you know. So there's some steps that are not saying, give Ken $31 million today. You know, there's the baby steps before that. And then you start getting into some more, the bigger decisions.
You guys take care of the secret.
Yes. I will have it all queued up for you.
See, we'll have this by Wednesday, June 30th. And is this a 1 page or is it a 10
It's a
page?
5-page report.
Pete wrote it. Pete wrote it, 162 pages.
Oh, great. No, we love Pete, but I hope Pete didn't write it.
I'm the guy who's stamping it.
Pete makes me look like a deaf mute writing.
We're using tonight's meeting, Tom, to finish the report.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and it's interesting because the day after that, we have our first formal board meeting in July. We have a workshop. We have a workshop on July 8th. Formal board meeting on July 16th. The deadline for the CWS, which is getting it in line. Is that a good slang for that?
Getting on the list.
All right. I think we all gotta go, Bill.
I gotta go.
All right. But I'm thinking that we gotta do something at one or more of those 3 board meetings leading up to July 16th.
Keep the ball rolling.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes.
All right.
Any special meetings we have to have.
Yeah,
We gotta get this thing at least to CW. That's all right.
I agree.
Yes.
I agree.
Yeah,
The devil's in the details, so we, I don't know, we'll,
I think it's
Guys.
just a formal
yeah.
acceptance of the PER and master plan.
For what, by which date, 30th or by the 16th?
Prior to the
Prior to the 16th.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, I'm glad you're staying in town tonight, George, because it's getting late.
This has been fun.
Yeah.
Well,